Welcome to Bite Size PL, professional learning you can consume during lunch or on a dog walk or while you wrap presents. Our goal is to provide meaningful, engaging, and brief conversations for educators. I'm Jared, and my co-host today is Jenette.
Good morning, Jared.
Good morning, Jenette. We have a special guest here today. We have math teacher extraordinaire Leslie Butler from Mill Creek Junior High.
Hi.
Welcome, Leslie.
Thanks.
Well, we were able to be in your class today, and that was just so fun to just see so many great things in there.
How would you think about this problem to make it easier to solve? You may not use the standard algorithm. Thumbs up when you have a strategy that you think makes it easier to solve. You may show an extra finger while you're waiting for other people to come up with a strategy. If for some reason this problem feels too hard for you today, you come up with an estimate. Everybody should have an answer in the next little while.
One of my favorite parts is being able to hear the student voices. And that was just something that was just very evident in your class, that is just something that is just part of every day, where students are going to be sharing with each other, sharing with the whole class.
Thumbs up if you'd like to share your answer.
I got 48.
48.
So what have you found about letting students share their thoughts and ideas?
First of all, unless I let them share, I have no idea what they're thinking. Really, it's always surprising. And that's what makes my job fun. And secondly, unless I let them share, they don't know what they're thinking half the time. So that's why it's important to me.
Well, I was thinking, like, when I was in a math class myself, generally, like, the teacher would just go over, like, okay, here's the correct answers. Mm-hmm. And you could have done that in your class. But what we noticed is there was like 10 different ways that the kids had solved this problem, and the teacher never would have known that. The kids wouldn't have seen all these other strategies. So making that visible and, for everybody to hear that, like, that just adds so much to what's going on there.
I think it's important for the kids to see that they're bringing something to the table. Okay, well, who's going to defend it? Parker. Okay, what are we doing while he's defending? We're listening. We're trying to make our brains more flexible, but trying to get inside his mind and fit our mind to that, okay? And then later I'm going to have you share with your partner which ones felt like a good idea to you. Okay.
I added 4 to 16.
Okay.
And then I added 4 to 64.
Their peers have things to say. They have things to say. Math is not this invention from somebody in ivory tower or any subject. These are ideas that were developed among peers, the things we teach in school. So I just think it's so great for them to be able to hear each other's voices and value that.
Can we talk a little bit about the culture you've created in the classroom where they're willing to share their ideas and possibly be wrong and be very vulnerable with each other? So how did you create that among a group of teenagers where they feel like they are willing to risk it?
Well, I don't know if you noticed at the front of the room, there's a sign that says errors are opportunities. We talk about that on the very first day. So we start doing math on the very first day, and they make mistakes on the very first day, and we start valuing those mistakes on the very first day. And we build on the mistakes. And then I also talk about how if you get something right, the learning has kind of stopped. But if you made a mistake, sometimes I even say, a bunch of people are about to learn something. Because I think I heard brain research, like after you made a mistake, your brain sort of wakes up ready to make a new connection. And so I've talked about that, whether it's true brain research or not.
It makes
works
the point.
For them. Yeah, they just know mistakes are super valuable. And that one today, I don't know if you noticed when the Jaden and Leilani had decided to share a thing that was totally wrong. And I thought, well, there must be in the minority. But when I checked with the class, the majority believed them. And it was so powerful to have all the kids then change their minds through that discussion.
Well, and then later you said that was our favorite one or something, talking about the one that someone had missed, and then you went back and helped it.
And I do say that a lot. It's okay if you're right. It's okay to be right, guys. But when you're wrong, that's my favorite, because that gives us something to learn from and talk about.
I love that you never, not in the number talk or in the warm-up activity, you never stepped in as teacher, as the authority, and gave answers. You resisted the urge to move along, to watch your time, to clarify. Like, you always went back to the students and the student voices and giving them a chance to get it right.
You have anything else to say about that? Anybody want to help with that part? I think that part can be confusing to some people. Because they have to believe in their own brains. Like whether they use this particular math in their lives, they need to value their own intellect and their own power, and they have to have some confidence in, I can figure this out. I can move forward and do things, and it's okay to make mistakes. I can be an independent thinker without somebody telling me everything.
It was also very clear that the expectation was that everyone's engaged. So it was
Yes.
nobody's writing on their whiteboard during the number talk. And I noticed you have the acronym STAR or SLANT. Which one did you?
STAR.
STAR, yeah, from Teach Like a Champion, which is, the way, I don't know, I can't remember.
Sit up, track,
the tracking,
ask and answer questions.
Yeah, so they were.
And we don't have to refer to that a lot, but sometimes when I get a ton of volunteers, I'll say, look, you guys are stars because you're ready to ask and answer questions. There was one girl with her head down who's like selective mute, and that's just her. She just tunes out. And if I were to ask her, she would get, every time we draw different seats every day. Every time she's on the front row, she's mortified, which is where she was today. But
she got through it.
She got through it. Yeah. And her partner kept talking to her. I admired that little partner for saying, hey, this is what I got. This is why I think that. So
that's how they help each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing that I want to bring up is I don't think it matters whether we're talking about math or English or whatever the topic is, like being able to talk through your learning, being able to share that in a way that, hopefully makes sense of it. 'Cause part of the magic for me is seeing how you were able to help guide the students when you could see where they're trying to go with it, and then you'd say like, okay, you need to share all the steps with me.
So I got 4 minus 1. And then,
Which is what? You got to tell me everything, remember? Okay.
and then I multiplied 3 by 16.
And then they would do that and just like, okay, that's the whole piece that we're looking for right here.
Yeah. But it is super tempting to take over. And I did
Your
use
restraint was amazing to me.
Yeah, it's
It would
tempting.
be such a time saver.
I'm so good at explaining too. And I used to teach English and French, so this is not the only subject I know. I do think it applies to all the subjects.
Why do you think it's so important to have so many different strategies presented? What is that doing for brains and learning?
I really do think that I am so much better at math now that I've taught 7th and 8th grade math. I have been helping high school nieces and nephews with calculus, which I never really understood. I was one of 6 girls in high school that took it, and my dad was an attorney and everybody else's dad was an engineer, so I never really got it. But now I help them just based on what I've learned from 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. I am so much smarter at math. Because and when I said to them, see somebody else's point of view, it's that flexibility of your brain to get all the way around a topic and kind of have a 3-dimensional view rather than this one flat thing.
Which is the algorithm.
So, yeah.
Which is, I'm thinking back to learning
That's
this
all
in
I
the
ever learned.
1970s.
Mhm.
It was the algorithm, or I was going 16, 26, 36, 46, 56. I would have done it by tens on my fingers to get up to the correct answer. And what your students were doing, I wouldn't have known anything about.
And I didn't teach them any of those strategies. I'm not saying somebody didn't at some point, but I would say most of those strategies weren't taught, although there's 2 or 3 that I'm pretty sure were. But I didn't teach them. I never mentioned them to anybody. So they're pulling it out of their head.
They are. They're working with numbers in their head and figuring out how to get the solution.
That's pretty exciting. They
yes.
do love to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about that with having the students share with one another, because that's just such a powerful piece of what we were able to see in the class.
We're going to go back to Ezra's, and you're going to tell your partner how you would finish off what Ezra started. His is right here, this red one. Okay? Talk about it. What would you do next on Ezra's?
What are some of the benefits that you've seen from having students share with one another?
I especially like small group sharing, so groups of 2 or 3, because they really listen. It's hard to tune out when you're in a 2-person conversation or a 3-person conversation. And we did something new this year, me and the teacher that I collaborate with a lot. Rather than publishing the keys to their homework or we never did give the answers in class because it's kind of a waste of time, but rather than publishing the key, we put them together when they're done and they talk about it. They go through it together and they love it. I said, why am I doing this? And they had so many suggestions I didn't even think of about why it was so great. Because I focus a lot better when there's only 3 people than when I have to listen to you. Or, and this person understands what I'm saying. They are so tuned into the fact that they can learn from each other. And that's been really exciting. And I did make a few changes this year that made that even stronger in my teaching than before. And they love it. They love to talk to each other. I can't remember all the great things they said, but they understand there's value in them being in 2 or 3. So when I say talk to your partner, it's rare that I have to say, did you actually talk to your partner?
Right.
No matter how shy they are.
And I did notice that you were in motion, like you were ready to support physically if there was any partnership that were not engaged, but they really were.
They really are
front to
accountable.
back.
They know. At the first, I did the first week or so, I have to say, did you discuss that? And they're with a different partner every day, but that's just the culture now. They all know you just talk to whoever. It's okay if they're not your favorite person and you don't have to marry them if you talk to them, Jared noticed that in number talk, sometimes they don't. We just share the strategies from one student up to the front. And I have incorporated having the partners talk about strategies just to make them more accountable for actually listening. Because it's a lot of listening. And they're fairly interested to see how the strategies compare to each other. But there are the days when we get a strategy and then 2 strategies later, it's the exact same thing. And that's why I started incorporating a little bit of trying to tell your partner what you liked or what do you think about what so-and-so did.
What we're going to do last is you're going to look at the different ways. And I did them in color, so maybe it'd be easier to see. Choose one that was not your way that made sense to you. And maybe I'll put letters on them. And then in just a minute, you be looking at them, which one made sense to you. And turn and tell your partner one that you might actually use in the future. It made that much sense to you. Talk about it.
In today's case, you got all the way to I, so there was 9 different strategies that were shared with the class, and that can be a lot to listen to for anybody, especially when there's a couple up there that are a little different. You're like, I don't know about that one. So I do like that accountability piece. I also really like that you're just really equipping kids and giving them more and more different strategies and ways to figure things out.
Right, good point. Because one thing I sometimes say is find a strategy you haven't used and maybe set a goal. I didn't say that today, but maybe set a goal to use that next time we do a number talk so that you're branching out and you're making your brain more flexible and stronger.
And again, whether we're talking about math or any subject, like it's being able to think through this and like, what is the best way that I can work through this problem? Because all of our subject areas have problems that we have to solve.
Right.
And just giving students multiple ways to do that is just a real power piece.
Flexibility in their thinking. I know I got some new strategies today, and I'm pretty good with mental math, but I was like, I never would have done that. So that was good for my brain as well.
Let's talk about the learning piece of this, and because that's really kind of the magic that I saw was that the focus was on the students, the focus was on the learning, and not so much on you as teaching up there. How has the focus on learning, kind of transformed your teaching?
Well, I went into teaching because I was always interested when teachers were teaching. I was always thinking, if they had done it this way, I think people would be paying better attention or thinking differently, even when I was young, like junior high, maybe even elementary. So when I started, though, probably my first year or so, I was very tuned into what I was doing as a teacher. But I pretty quick made the transition to, I need to know what those students are thinking. And so that's my focus. Like, I'm constantly looking in their eyes around the room and thinking, what is that person thinking? And then if I adjust my behavior, it's based on what their thinking is or what they're doing. And I think that's so important to be student focused in your teaching. It's not about what you're doing. It's about what's happening in their mind. And you didn't see this, but generally during class, we are writing on whiteboards almost all period long, so I know what's happening in their mind, or I'm eavesdropping on their conversations because my teaching is being adjusted all period long based on that feedback of what are they saying, what are they thinking, are they doing this, or did they like, what's that called when you just give up because you're at a standstill? I need to know those things, and that's my focus. And I think it's just so important to get out of the me as a performer to me as really in a conversation with the students, and mostly them talking and me listening and then adjusting.
Right. And you gave them so many opportunities to respond, whether that was like to the whole class or to their neighbor or on their whiteboard. Like, and so you're just constantly assessing like the whole time.
Yes.
And they don't really know that's what you're doing, but that's what you're doing. And you're able to make adjustments from that.
I feel like that last answer that you gave, I could just play on repeat, like again and again, because that is so profound about teachers as performers versus teachers discerning what's happening in the heads of the students, and then trying to figure out how to support what's in their heads already and help them get to, whatever the goal is. That's
I like
amazing.
the idea of a conversation, which honestly, this is the first time I thought of it that way. But that really is what it is. If I was talking to you, I wouldn't just talk at you. I would wait to see what you said and then adjust what I'm going to say based on that.
Good stuff. Thank you so much for sharing your classroom with us. Well, we always ask our guests to share a gift, something that you're loving currently. Do you have something to share?
I did they call these driveway moments on NPR, National Public Radio. And I did recently listen to a podcast called Finn and the Bell. It was so good. It actually was a rebroadcast of a local podcast in Vermont. But I recommend it to everybody. You could just search Finn and the Bell.
So is it like a series of podcasts?
It's just it is in a series, but it's just one podcast I heard.
Finn and the Bell.
Yes.
Well, as always, we'd like to thank our producer, Tom, for making us sound so good. This season, we're putting the video of the podcast on YouTube. You can continue listening on your favorite podcast app and check out the video on our YouTube channel. Check the show notes for that link. Thanks for joining us. Please like and subscribe and share the podcast with others. See you at school.